traditional leadership theory says pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible, and you're easily replaceable. But if I work for you and you come to me and you say, hey, I'm really interested in supporting your well-being, I'm going to go, hell yeah. Like, I'm all for that, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't I be? So this is a win-win.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I have Mark Crowley. Mark is a pioneer in workplace leadership, first penning his book, Lead from the Heart. If you're watching on video, you can see in the background in 2011. After years in finance, he sought to make an impact in more organizations as an author, speaker, and podcast host. He is recognized as one of the top 50 leadership experts in 2025, has a new book, The Power of Wellbeing, Employee Wellbeing. Let me get that out right. That full title, The Power of Employee Wellbeing. Mark, thanks for being here with me, man.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
So I want to dip into kind of a little bit of compilation of your two books. And there's a lot of similars. I look at it as the Power of Employee Wellbeing is kind of the 2.0 again of the Lead from the Heart, because it really goes more into, instead of the leader, the employee. And one thing you recognize in your work is employee engagement. And you kind of share this, that, when you look at the workforce, and this has been well documented over decades, that 30% or less are quote unquote engaged. And, it's even lower globally. And we've had decades of these engagement surveys, but nothing's changed. And what can you tell us about the disconnect between the drive for, engagement and actually how people are being led and are being, I guess, served through companies?
So engagement, in my opinion, is something that has been nothing but virtue signaling for over a decade. And you start with Wall Street. Wall Street never thought it was important. So they never told CEOs it was important. So CEOs never made it really important in their organizations. I think they went along with, if you want to survey people, that's fine. But there was never any accountability. And so you get these results, you do a survey once or twice a year, which is ridiculous as a premise. By the time you get the data and you get it back out to managers, people are reading it and they're like, oh, that employee, that happened like 4 months ago. That's no longer relevant. And so all of these reasons, but the big one is the accountability. We never held managers accountable. So you have somebody pouring their heart out. They're saying, let's say they, work for Bill Jones. I work for Bill Jones, and Bill Jones is the most toxic manager I've ever worked with. And, I'm going to quit this company because I can't stand it. And you guys need to do something because Bill doesn't care about his people and all he does is manage with fear. Well, Bill Jones may see that feedback, but no one's ever said, Bill, you're going to have to change. And so as a consequence, in 2013, I wrote an article in Fast Company and was given permission by Gallup to announce the numbers that you just mentioned, which is that just 30% of Americans are engaged in their job. And what does that mean? It means just 3 in 10 people are willing to put in discretionary effort and support their managers and their companies in any way. Most people are either phoning it in or, really angry. So if the numbers haven't changed in 13 years, that's pretty good evidence that we've never really taken it seriously. So I'll stop here.
Seems pretty prudent to me, but
I'm arguing it's time to move on and stop pretending, because there's something better to be measuring anyway, that's simpler, where you can actually hold people accountable for it. And that's employee well-being.
All right. So this is a big question that might take us the next 55 minutes because it's multifaceted. Why?
Why didn't we take
all of it? Why didn't we take it serious? Why did we, just kind of like, even, as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking about stuff that I'm dealing with in my life, right? Not employee engagement, but through an organization that, I'm privy to, right? It's the, you said, Bill, you have to change. And as you made your example, it's like, hey, people aren't engaged, Bill, you have to change. And it's like, well, why do I have to? Do I need to? what does change mean? And I think that's where it comes back to, all of these whys, and even as a reference and hinge on this is, even if someone were to walk in, right? You walk into the C-suite, right? You think about this Bill Jones, you walk into the C-suite, he's the CEO, maybe a board member, HR, we have this, and like, hey, Bill, you need to change. And you mentioned the accountability. Now, what happens if all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't think he's doing anything wrong. It should be like that. I don't think there's really or people are afraid to walk into that office because if they say, hey, Bill, you need to change, they're fired, right? Don't force me to change. I don't need to change. I'm doing it the right way. And I see that in organizations. I see that in communities. And so I come back to this, and it's this, again, so many different things is why. Why
Well, I mean,
should we be different?
the
Yeah,
direct
please.
answer, the direct answer is that there's science that proves that there's a linear relationship to employee well-being and productivity, so much so that it's week to week. So
Yeah.
how a team gauges its own well-being drives whether or not productivity is high, and you can measure this on all of your key performance indicators. So it's kind of irrefutable. But the answer of why it hasn't happened up until now is that traditional leadership theory says pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible, and you're easily replaceable.
Yeah.
So when you introduce the idea of we should be caring about people's well-being, people go, well, that's just stupid. That's just complete bullshit. Like, what do I care? If they don't like the
Yeah.
job, I'll get somebody else in there. Well, work has just become much more complex, and there's more compelling evidence that shows that teams that stay together are higher performing. So you don't want turnover. But the cost of turnover, when you start to think about recruiting and retraining and cultural knowledge and ramping up to understanding how to do the jobs, I think companies are finally figuring out that it really is in their best interest to find ways to get people where
Yeah.
they want to stay, as opposed to I want to get the hell out of here as fast as I can, and I
Yeah.
will when I can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if that means another year from now you're getting something subpar in terms of their performance, because their mentality is, I'm not here for the long term, so why should I commit? So
Yeah.
bottom line is that well-being, the science is really clear. And the other thing is Tyler, is something really important, is that companies wanted people to be engaged. So let's say you work for me. My goal
Yeah.
is I want you to be more engaged. Why? Because engaged people work harder and contribute more, right? So you go,
Yeah.
okay. So, but what's in it for me? If I'm the employee and you come to me and I work for you and you go ahead, really hoping you'll be more engaged. So like, I'm already doing my job. What's in it for me? But if I work for you and you come to me and you say, hey, I'm really interested in supporting your well-being, I'm going to go, hell yeah. Like, I'm all for that, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I be? So this is a
Yeah.
win-win.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
when you understand that employee well-being drives performance, and your goal as a leader is to drive performance, then why wouldn't you make the pivot tied to that understanding, right? So we're giving leaders new information, and we're saying the old model doesn't work. That's why it's 30% engagement. That's why people are miserable.
Yeah.
That's why people don't stay. And if your goal is to build a team that's going to be high performing, here's what the science says. Help people support their well-being as part of your job, and your job as a leader in terms of getting them to perform just became instantly much easier and more sustainable. That's the answer.
So I posited this to you before we hit record, kind of my theory, my work in regards to why people don't lead with the heart, right? And we talked lead from the heart, with your heart, with all of that. If we go back to this idea, and you made that, it's irrefutable. Like it's been proven. You have companies, you share examples in your books about all these people that, organizations that have cared about their employees, and their profits almost I would say defy the rest of the market. That's been proven. That's shown, right? And yet people are still like, no, we're not going to do it. That's not the way. Like, what do you, going back to again, this, I don't want to be belaborous with it, but this why do you think those
The
leaders
why, the
hold on
why
to that?
is in many cases, Gallup did this thing. They found out. I call it a caring gene.
Oh,
like it's a
okay.
genetic thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what Gallup called, but I've been very close to Gallup for many years, and I was having a conversation with their head of research, and he goes, we figured out that about one third of all people on the planet have an instinct to care about or be interested in the success, growth, and well-being of other people. That's essentially what he said to me. So what he's saying is that for the most part, 70% of the world is focused on their own goals, their own money, their own rewards, their own career growth, and all that. So there's a small percentage of people that look at other people and say, I want to draw out the best in them. And so interestingly, if it's 30% of the people naturally have that instinct, it corresponds sort of perfectly with why 30% of the world is engaged. I
Yeah.
find that
Yeah.
fascinating, right? So
Yeah.
it's just that you basically, it's you roll the dice, you go to your work, and you have 3 in 10 chances of working for somebody who's going to be doing everything that I've been advocating for. And they do it more naturally and they get better success and people become engaged. So the point I'm trying to make is we are also hiring the wrong people into leadership roles. So if you don't care about the success, growth, and other people, and well-being of other people, then you shouldn't be in a leader. Like I literally make that point in the book. And if you look at your successes in your life and they're all individual contributor kinds of things, and you can't really point to moments where you helped somebody else succeed and you took great satisfaction in that, that is a very clear sign that leadership is not for you, because you're going to compete with your people. You're not going to be looking out
Yeah.
for them. You're not going to be sensitive to their needs. And so reciprocally, people are going to feel that I'm working for somebody who doesn't
Yeah.
give a shit about me. And so why
Yeah.
should I give a shit about you? That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that we need to have a greater discipline in who we hire for leadership roles, and bring people into leadership roles who have a history, who can tell you stories of how they help people. Even if it's when I was in the 8th grade, I had a kid next to me, and whatever it is, if you can see that there's a pattern where they do this, those are the people we should be putting into leadership. However, I also think that a lot of this can be learned. And so the majority of my new book, The Power of Employee Wellbeing, is a primer on how to do this.
Hmm.
So if you buy into the premise that the way we've been managing people is completely misaligned to human nature, and we should be aligning ourselves better by supporting the needs in people so that they will reciprocate by doing great work for me. How do I do it? And that's really what the book is. It teaches managers how to do it. So in a couple hours, you can walk away and go, I never, ever thought of that as being a driver of productivity, but now I understand it. People can just take that information and immediately transition again, as long as they're motivated to help other people. I can't teach anything to somebody who is just singularly focused on their own successes.
All right. This is going to be off the wall, but go with me. And you wrote it. So hopefully it's not too far fetched. Using that same 30-70, right? 30 engaged, the 30% of people that care. Something just hit me. And I turned to open your book where I'm highlighted and have it. Would you gather that the 30% of the ones that care probably have a culture of growth, whereas the 70% that don't maybe are more focused on a culture of genius, as you referenced from Mary Murphy?
Correct.
It just hit me as you're saying it. I wonder the correlation. I would think be very high,
Yes.
but
I mean, so naturally, yes. So let's define this for your audience. A culture of genius basically assumes some people have it, most people don't. And so in our culture of our organization, our team, we're just not going to be too concerned about most people. We're just going to be concerned with the people we think are smart, we think are really capable and productive, and we're not really interested in the rest of the people. They're here, but they're sort of subservient to these star employees, versus a culture of growth, which says that, and this is, a derivation of Carol Dweck's work, that demonstrates that if you believe in a growth mindset, that people can actually get better. And I knew this in my entire career. People, and I wrote about this. You sit down, you're taking over a new team, right? And either the person's retiring or they're going into a new job or they're leaving the company or whatever. And now I'm taking over the team. And I go, well, tell me about the people. And they go, oh, well, Joey over here is your star. Mary's another star. these two people, Eric and Greg, they're done. Like these people have nothing. They have no more potential. Don't even worry about them. And then I sit down with Eric and Greg and I go, what's going on with you guys? And they're like, we don't get any attention. We don't get any development. We don't get any growth. And I have all kinds of ideas and I can contribute at a higher level. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. So by giving people your attention and by figuring out what their talents are, by nurturing that talent, coaching them and making them believe in themselves again, I turned people over and over and over with a culture of growth. So it's like, but that's instinctive to me because I love people and I want to see people succeed. And so if I can teach somebody something that will help them succeed and I see them succeed, I'm taking that as a personal victory. Like that's a
Yeah.
result of my leadership, even though that person is the big winner because they've
Yeah.
done something great. Right. But we just have this attitude in business that survival of the fittest. We're not doing anything to invest in you. That's this, this culture of genius. And it's just patently stupid. You should be hiring people that you love, hiring people that you think have the talent, and then developing them, growing them, invest
Yeah.
in them, and let them,
Here's
flourish.
man, I mean, this is totally off tangent, but it's fun because I'm thinking of the stories you've wrote, but also kind of, this idea, this culture of genius, culture of growth, coming back to the engagement, hinging it on our leaders actually caring. Do they have the capacity to care? And one of the things that I've realized that, you just alluded to a sink or swim, right? You either can do it or you can't. And, I look at that, that was early in my career. I think that happened to a lot of Gen X, probably had to some boomers. And then you get into this point, we don't have enough people. So we need the millennials and Gen Z because we need bodies, right? And so I was like, all right, how do we deal with these people? They don't have the drive to swim. And what I've understood there is in the sink or swim model, the people that swim often have no idea how they ever did it. And there's a lot of people that drowned. And so when you promote the leader who got to the edge of the pool because they just flailed along long enough, they don't have the capacity to teach others because they just survived. All right, hold on to that. You and I were both alike. In one of the stories, I think it was from Lead from the Heart, where you talked about not being picked on the teams because I was tiny, I was the smallest, I was the slowest, I wasn't real athletic. That was me growing up. And this is the thing I heard just the other day. Some of the best football coaches are some of the least talented because they don't discount the middle performers. They weren't the star performers that knew how to swim. And so they look at everyone else like, Mark, I figured out how to do it. Why can't you? They were like, oh, I needed help because I didn't know how to do it. And somebody came alongside me and helped me. And now I, excelled my talent because someone believed in me. All right, that's a lot of framing up, but just as you're digesting that, thinking about that, how much do you think that impacts the leadership of a lot of organizations?
Well, I mean, we tend to, and I have a great example of what you're talking about, but to pin it down, we routinely promote people into management roles, people who are star individual contributors.
Yeah.
And what companies don't realize is that the behaviors, practices, skill set, mindset, heart set are fundamentally different than as an individual contributor than they are for being a
Yeah.
leader. We just automatically assume, well, you're really good architect, so you're going to be a great manager of architects.
Yeah.
And people are like, this is the worst, shittiest manager I've ever worked for. And we're like, how could that be? He's like our best architect because managing people is nothing like any of that. So you're a sports fan. So I would ask you, like talking about individual stars like that. Could you imagine Alex Rodriguez managing a team? Like
Yeah.
he is the most self-focused guy in the world, right?
Yeah.
Everything was about Alex Rodriguez,
Yeah.
For his whole career.
For
You see him
those that
on
maybe
TV.
aren't sure, the baseball player played with the Mariners, played with the Yankees predominantly. Didn't he have a stint with the Marlins or something crazy
I
at the
thought,
end? Well, anyways, whatever.
I forget where he started. To be honest with you, I should know that.
He was drafted by the
But
Mariners. He started when he was
Yankees
19.
bought
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
from somewhere like they always do. But the point is that he's he leans into narcissism. He wants to be he wanted to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
one of the greats. So is he the guy who's sitting on the bench going, "Hey, I was watching your swing over here, and if you could just like lift your wrist up just a little bit, I think he's like thinking about his own game. How can I do this?" And he's almost competing with those people, right?
Yeah.
So here's the perfect example of what you're talking about. So I don't necessarily think that it means that you have to be sort of an average performer to be a great manager, but here's an example that sort of suggests that it is. Bruce Bochy was
Yeah.
a second string catcher for the San Diego Padres long before they were any good. And they haven't been very good for many years. But when he played with them, they were like a sub 500 team every year.
Yeah.
He had like a 219 lifetime batting average, 27 home runs over 9 years. So, like, this isn't your star. He's not even a star. He's not even a starter on an average team or a
You
sub
play him
average.
because the other guy is just so tired that you have to put in another guy.
You got to put him in. You got to give him
Yep.
a rest, right? And
Yep.
that's but he played 9 seasons, so he's a major league baseball player. You can't take it away from him, right? So, but he is the guy who's sitting on the bench telling everybody else, "Hey, I saw you do this, and if you do this, you might want to change, how you're looking at the ball or swinging or whatever." He was that guy, and the Padres looked at him and they said, "Like, you have coaching instincts." So they literally made him the head coach of the San Diego Padres, and in 1998, his first year, he took them to the World Series. First time since 1984, only the second time in their history. And what did they do after he lost to the Yankees, perhaps the greatest Yankee team ever in 98? They fired him thinking they didn't take him far enough, instead of realizing he took them to up against the Yankees. Like, this is a great coach. So they let him go. What did he do? He went to San Francisco and won 3 World Series
Yep.
as a coach. Then he retired. Then he came back and went to Texas and won another World Series. So there's something to be said.
You're kind of like your sports paindom, and I know you're from New York, living in San Diego, so I can appreciate that. As a Browns fan, okay, I'm a Browns fan, and to see Bill Belichick go to New England, I hear exactly what you're saying. Like, I get it totally.
What are you saying? Tell me, because I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, that you didn't. You had a mid performer. Bill Belichick was a mid performer. He
Oh,
leaves
I
your
see.
team because
I
you
get
think
yeah.
he didn't do enough, and then he
Mhm.
goes on and he is allowed to perfect his craft. And it's
Mhm.
maybe not as fast. It's not the flash in the pan, but you give them time. Like you said, Bruce Bochy. Oh, he didn't do enough. Oh, give me time. Let me build up. Let me build belief into others. Let me be a swim coach. Don't expect me to just, swim and then all of a sudden have instant results. Give me time.
Well, I think the point that I was trying to make was that when we look for who is going to be a leader that we would put on to manage a team, the
Yeah.
idea of just because the candidate in front of us is the number one salesperson or pharmacist or architect or whatever, that doesn't necessarily, in fact, it almost exclusively means that they probably don't have, because they're driven to be number one. Like, why
Yeah.
are you the best at what you're doing? Because you're so focused on being great at that, then you put them into a management role where the responsibilities are no longer about you. It's about the 10 people that are working for you. But if you're just so completely focused on how you're going to be seen and how you're going to be recognized and how you're growing, you're not thinking about those people, and they can feel it. And we're wired to reciprocate. So if I'm working for you and I can tell you simply don't care about me, you don't know anything about me, you're not doing anything to advance me, I'm going to reciprocate in kind. So
Yeah.
conversely, if I'm working for you and like you're meeting with me regularly, you know what's going on in my personal life, you know what my challenges are, you know what my goals are for work, you know what I'm trying to learn, you know what opportunities I'd like to have, you know how often I like to be appreciated and how I'm having all of these needs met. I'm looking at you and I'm like, I just want to do everything I can to help you. This is how we're wired as humans. So we treat people badly, you're going to get 30% engagement. That's the way it works. If you're going to treat me indifferently, I'm going to feel that indifference and I'm just going to pay you back by clocking in and
Yeah.
clocking out,
Yeah.
doing enough to keep my
Yeah.
job.
Um, You're one of them, obviously, starting with your book, Lead from the Heart, years ago, to a lot of others that you can just go through the list of people that have evangelized, care more about people, and, they'll get better results. And yet we still have organizations today. I was talking to a company yesterday and they were discussing this where they had some leadership change and people just got put into roles because, oh, they were performers and now they have people on the team leaving. It's still happening today, much like what you were saying is we do all these employee engagement metrics and we want it to be different, but nothing's changing. Do you think it's this same accountability factor is that, you know, we have leaders that think that the result is pay them more, promote the top performer, that's the result, but it's not. Why do you think the train of thought is still traditionally those, I would say, ineffective ways of running organizations and leading?
I mean, again, we're hiring the wrong people in management roles. Like, if you don't care about people, if it's not in your heart to do that, you're going to have a hard time really getting the best out of people because people are looking for much more than a paycheck from work. They want to grow, they want to develop, they want to do meaningful work, they want to feel like they belong on the team. All these kinds, they want to feel appreciated, they want growth opportunities. So, if you're just focused on yourself, you're not going to be thinking about people, and people can feel that and they're going to
Yeah.
reciprocate. But I want to point something out here is that
Yeah.
the idea of people first or caring about your people, where I feel that I'm distinguished, is that the reason that my book is called Lead from the Heart isn't to get people to go, well, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about because we don't bring heart into leadership and all that kind of stuff. I took a risk by calling it that. But the reason is that to this day, I'm the only one who's saying that this is literal. So it's not a metaphor to lead from the heart. I'm saying that the heart is involved in influencing our
Yeah.
choices and our behaviors. Feelings and emotions drive our feelings, and the heart is involved with that and telling the mind what to do with it. So
Yeah.
we have a feeling, you and I are having a
Yeah.
conversation, you're listening to me, your body, your heart is involved in this, is making an assumption or assessment of like, this is a cool conversation. I hope this continues. I'm enjoying this. Or this guy's full of shit. And how do I cut? Oh, Mark, I've got a fire in the house and I got to go. It starts in the body. It starts here,
Well,
right? So I'm saying the reason that you want to care about people is because it's human nature. You want to align up to what's going to bring in the best in people.
yeah.
And we've conflated this by, like I got to be kind to them or, and it's not that. It's what you were saying.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the person and figuring out what they want in exchange for work and helping them get that. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, in I the only way for you to positively affect, this is my premise, and the only way for you to positively impact employee well-being is having a heart and caring for their heart. I will say that if that's an establishment of the work that you've done, I wholeheartedly believe that. And yet I also know, as we've talked about, either we've put the wrong people in position or we have not encouraged them to say, hey, get out of your mind and get into your heart. Get out of your mind and get into your heart, because too often it is the strategy, it is the numbers, it is everything that our mind is trying to say is like, nope. You talk to probably a baseball coach, you talk football coach, you talk basketball coach. It's like you have people that believe, that want to contribute, and it doesn't matter what plays you execute, as long as you do them properly, you're going to win. And I think the same can be in business. If you can have the worst strategy, and it's not like going backward strategy, but not an effective strategy. But if people are bought in, they know you care about them, you're going to exceed a lot more than a company with a great strategy has no one that cares. That's my belief. That's
You
what I've
you have
seen.
to you have to believe that for one thing. And before we started recording,
Yeah.
we were talking about the reasons why um, managers, leaders will attempt to lead more caringly. So let's say you work for me and I'm, all about learning about you and helping you grow and coaching you and, affirming you, giving you appreciation. And so it's working, right? But then I look at the results And I'm like, wait a minute, our team is like 50% with 2 weeks to go in the quarter. And I'm going to get hammered if we don't hit our goals. So what happens is, of course, you can guess, is that people go, forget about all that caring bullshit. If you don't hit your goals, you're going to be in trouble. Like somebody's going to be gone. Right. So now let's say we hit the goal. Any display of, I really do care about you, Tyler, and I really care about you,
Yeah.
you're going to go, no, you don't, man.
Yep.
Because when the moment of truth came, you showed your true colors, and I will never trust you again. So it's really a matter of leaders believing in themselves enough and their ability to influence, because I think what it comes down to is that managers believe that I'm not going to get to that goal at the end of the quarter unless I bark at people, unless I revert to the old ways. When instead, what you should be doing is sitting down and going, guys, we're in trouble. We are at, we're at 50%. I think we can get there, but we need to talk about it. Let's figure out how we're going to get there and engage everyone and tell people, I
Yeah.
believe in you, but we're way behind and I really need you to step up. When you do that and you have a history of caring about people and you are passing that moment of truth where people are like, okay, he's not going to the gun. He's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
coming out with, you people aren't getting where you need to. And I'm going to, you're in trouble
Yeah.
if you don't, and all the
Yeah.
threats and intimidation that we
Yeah.
do. It's that moment of truth that you have to be able to hurdle. And it has to come from here. You have to go, I have enough of a good relationship with my people. I've supported them. I believe in them. I know we're capable of doing this. I'm not going to go full Monty on fear and intimidation and blow the trust that I've established here. So it has to be authentic. Like you can't bullshit your way through this and you can't change in midstream and go, well, because we're only at 50%, I have permission to be a dick. It's like, no, you don't. You never do.
No.
You don't.
No.
But this is what happens is
Yeah.
like
Oh,
people go, oh my
it
God,
does.
I'm going to get in trouble. My
Yeah.
boss is going to yell and scream at me. So
Yeah.
I'm going to yell
Yeah.
and scream at mine. And I'm like, no, have the discipline to not be that guy and you will get there. Maybe not to 100%. You're 50 with 2 weeks to
Yeah.
go. But if you got to 85,
Yeah.
that would be, right. But your
Better than
people are on
losing the whole
board.
team.
Yes. Right. You otherwise, yes, you're still at 50 at the end of the quarter and your people hate you forever. Right.
Yeah. Did How did you figure that out?
You know, in the preface to Lead from the Heart, which I originally wrote in 2011 and then wrote a second edition 3 years ago, I tell the story. But long and short of it is that the way that I was raised was very, very toxic. Mom died when I was very young. My father was psychologically and emotionally abusive in ways that are still indescribable to me, and then kicked me out of the house right when I turned 18, like a week after high school, with no money, no support, never went back for a holiday, birthday, nothing. Saw him 4 or 5 times before he died 15 years later, most of them in the hospital. So he just didn't care about me. And that was something that I realized in my life that differentiated me from other people that I was around. You're going to college and you're seeing people thriving in college and you're seeing they have close relationships with their parents and they're being thoughtfully directed and they're being approved of and encouraged. Hey, you got to be on the paper. I know you want an A.
Yeah.
Next time you're going to do it. I had none of
Yeah.
that. So when I started managing people, I made an unconscious decision to give people all the support that I never got and always wanted, because I basically realized that the difference between me and people that were graduating from college at the same time with me, they're going off to graduate schools confidently. I'm going to Stanford Business School. I'm going to law school. And I'm like, God, man, I'm just grateful for getting through this. But I had it harder than they did to get through it. And I got through the same major university that they did with honors. I should be more confident in myself, not less. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm a lucky guy for getting through? And these people are so confident that they're going off and applying to graduate schools. And I'm thinking, nobody's going to want me. And it was
Hmm.
those things. It was all about care. So I'm 43 years old. So this is 20 years later after I started doing this. A woman who had worked for me worked for me for those 20 years, just barged in my office one day, completely unannounced. And she just literally blurts out, "You realize you manage people very differently than everybody else around here, don't you?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" So she started giving me examples. She goes, "You coach people, you train people, you develop them, you make them feel safe. They love you." And she goes, "And they perform for you. Your team is always better than everybody else, but everybody around you is managing with fear. Like, if you don't get this goal by the end
Mhm.
of this week, we're going to have that conversation."
Yeah.
I had a guy in my office next to me. "I'm taking you to the woodshed." Who
Yeah.
wants to go to the woodshed, right? I mean, this kind of mentality. So when I realized what she was telling me, I realized, oh my God, I've been doing this unconsciously my entire career. But now that it's conscious and I see the impact, I'm realizing like I've almost accidentally had to have this corrupt upbringing, really
Yeah.
destructive upbringing to
Yeah.
manage people in a way that got performance in ways that no one else was doing. And so I basically spent, the last 20 years perfecting it, trying to figure out why. And so I have the science behind me, and it's the science that has come out, Tyler, in the last 5 years is
Yeah.
astonishing. But like, it's simply non-negotiable any longer. Like, people go, "Well, that won't work in engineering, or that won't work on a professional hockey team, or whatever." Everybody's got their fantasy.
Uh,
But in my experience, it's just a human thing. You're just
I
managing human
I agree.
beings.
Yeah.
So that's how I
Yeah.
got there.
All right. I hope you'll go with me here. And if I need to, I'll share about me a little bit more. Why do you think your dad acted that way?
I've spent a lot of time, because I'm not the only one, and he destroyed his children. I'm probably like, truly, the only survivor out of seven
Okay.
kids. Um, and so, I had to do a lot of healing to overcome that harm. So
Yeah.
I want to emphasize it was
Yeah.
real harm.
Yeah.
Um, but his father left when he was 2 years old,
Okay.
and his mom did not have a degree, and so she didn't have the means to support herself and her two children. She had a daughter that was like 3 or 4 years older. So she put the two kids in foster homes and went to the University of Minnesota and got a degree, and then became the head librarian in the chemistry department at Minnesota. And I'm not sure when. I never really found this
Yeah.
out, but A, you don't have a father. B, now your mother is going to school and you're in foster homes and you're not with your sister. So I think that whole experience warped him. And I think it ended up making him feel very resentful for people who had it easier, like, i.e., a
Mm,
father around, somebody who
yeah.
loved them, cared about
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And so, people have described it to me, because I've had to dig into this, obviously, to heal it. But I think that he did it. Um, because he was competing with his own children, which we see this in leadership, where people are
Yeah.
threatened by the
Yeah.
very people that they're supposed to be supporting. And that was his worst behavior. He saw things that, his kids were doing. And the minute he saw them doing something really great, instead of saying, "I'm so proud of you," it's like, "Well, you can't keep that up." Or, "That kid down the block, he's still better than you." It was always trying to push back on you. So I think he was limited, is
It
really.
was so his actions were undermining. Do you think it was to build him up, or was it to do you think there was maybe even a thought of I'm going to toughen you up? And again,
Yeah,
I don't know
I
on that
I
last
think
one.
there was. I think it's more of the former, to be honest with
Okay.
you. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think his mentality was that, because I learned certain things from him. I mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't, right?
Yeah.
No matter how bad somebody is, you're still going to pick up something from them. So,
Well,
and
and that can go both sides. You can learn something good, or I would contend and say, man, you can learn something great and served tens of thousands
Well,
of
I've
people
learned
because
I've
of it.
learned not to do what he did. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
perfect, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it was this dichotomy of whatever he would do is probably not the best instinct. So, like, if you're raising your own children, like, I have a son, and like, the last thing I wanted him to have was an experience like this. So when he talks about my father, he talks about him in reverence, because he was a
Yeah.
big deal. Like, he was a
Yeah.
very senior guy at General Electric, and he was a Olympic athlete and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit there and arm wrestle with my son and go, no, what? He wasn't. He was a prick. He was a horrible human being. I'm not going to do that. I would just
Yeah,
assume
yeah,
that we don't
yeah,
pass that on, right? And he
yeah,
didn't get any of
yeah,
that from me.
yeah,
So, so yeah, you learn, just like you have a bad manager, you go, I don't want to do that because I see the impact
yeah,
on people as you're going to pick up from them. But I think he really did. He was a dark person because I think he just got warped by his own upbringing
yeah,
and never, in this era,
yeah,
like people go to counselors and, they get help and like that wasn't it. It's just full steam ahead. It's like whatever your limitations are, you bring them into the world and you pay the prices when but he did so much harm to his children, but couldn't see it because he was so detached from, what was driving it. It was all
yeah.
unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, here and you make such an amazing parallel, the idea of leaders that compete with their people. I've seen that. I've experienced that. I had a leader who I would say took advantage of me in my early in my career, and I had no idea in order to get promoted, and it ruined probably the next 10 years. It ruined that career for me because then I had the reputation of something that he did to drive his personal success
Mhm.
and kind of differently similarly, but that happens. And I think when it comes back to this conversation about engagement or why don't we lead differently is you know we're all people. I have my own past stuff that I had to work through, and I'll gladly share it with you so you're informed here. And at the same point, like you did, and you went to the positive, and yet there's someone else, maybe it could have been a sibling, right, who all of a sudden, that's what I need to be because that's what I was. And so we have that in workplaces, and it comes back to this 30-70. And I would say you're probably one of the unique 30, right? And there's a whole lot of 70s, right? And that's where I shared with you at the very beginning. I had to go through the process of recognizing how I responded to my own trauma of something like that was to become super intense and just put my head down and push and push and push because I had to prove myself the worth, like the value you talked about. And,
Mhm.
and so when I see that, and as I talk to you about it, it's like, why do leaders lead the way? I don't think most of them know. I mean, I don't know your dad, right? I have no idea. But even if you stopped and think, I think this about some and not right. It's either I'm trying to cover up my own pain, or this is the way that I am, I think is the best. Obviously not.
I mean, you're really making a very important point here. That So I mean, it's interesting because the preface of Power of Employee Well-being is really that we need to move on from engagement. But the rest of the book is okay. So if you bought into that, and we're going to focus on employee well-being, here's how you do it. The very first chapter, by coincidence, is called Know Thyself.
Yep.
So I have a
Yep.
father who's never approving of anything that I'm doing, even though like at 10 years old, I'm 10 and I'm in New York, with snow. I'm delivering a newspaper 6 days a week, all on my own. No one's telling me what to do. I'm doing well in school. I went to Catholic schools. I'm in the choir. I'm an altar boy. I'm like doing everything I could possibly do. And I'm getting no love from it. There's
Never
just
enough.
absolutely nothing. Right. So, um, as I look at that, when I'm 45 years old, I'm realizing that from the time that I was 18 to the time I was 45, that I was driven to prove to a ghost who wasn't in my life, oh, yeah, you don't think I can do this? Look what I just did here. See the promotion I got? Vice president at 30 years old, senior vice president at 35 years old, national level positions, like on and on and on and on. But I was pushing people really hard in order for me to attain
Mm.
that. And
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
said to me one day, she goes, what do you think motivated that? And I go, I like success. She goes, maybe you're trying to prove something to your father. I'm like, maybe, right? So
Uh-oh.
well, go on. What's your point? But I realized so the first chapter is know thyself
Yeah.
because we all have our experiences, whether, I mean, people come up to me all the time and they go, I had the exact same experience you had. And I'm like, no, you didn't. but you think you did, and that's your trauma, that's your life experience, and you're going to have to work through it. But whatever it was, death in the family, parents got divorced, mother was never gave you any attention, sibling you were always fighting with. We bring these people into our adult life and they're influencing our choices and our behavior all day long. And if you're unconscious of it, like I was until I was 40 something years old, that I was being driven by a ghost, I'm working my ass off all the time because it's never enough. I got to get another award. I got to get another piece of recognition. I got to get all that to prove to this ghost that I'm worthy and have value. That's a corrupt motivation. It got me
Hmm.
to be very successful, but I think I could have been successful if I had sort of tempered that and say
Hmm.
that's a good thing too. But how about prove it to yourself, not proving to
Hmm.
somebody who's not really in your life?
Yeah.
So spending time asking yourself, like, what did I go through in my childhood? I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's like the most formative part of our lives, the first 18 years. Did we move a lot? Did I not have a lot of friends? Did I have people that weren't good communicators? Find out what that was because it's going to have an influence. And the reason you do this, and this is the point that I think you were getting at, is that when you get the understanding of it, you can say, do I want to keep going with that? Do I want to bring that forward? Is that something that I want to continue to
Hmm.
do? So if I've got a father that's never approving of me, do I want to keep going, trying to prove to him, or do I want to say I'm going to have to find another motivation because that's not a good one? If I have a mother who appreciated, like basically told me I was great all the time and I'm walking around like a rooster at work and everybody thinks I'm an asshole because, guy thinks so much of himself. And you go, oh, I realize it's because I grew up with a mom that was always telling me I'm great. I mean, this is just sort of instinctive,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stream of consciousness. But at that point you go, maybe that's not a good thing. Like maybe I don't want to be that person anymore. But you have to do the work. You have to go through the sequence and say, what were these pivotal, important events? And say, how did they influence me? My mom dying, that was a big event. How did it influence me? It influenced me in a lot. I felt a major loss for much of my life. There was always something missing. But if you heal that and you go, okay, you can't go on forever that way. You can't
Yeah.
change that. So let's
Yeah.
address it. Sometimes it's just, if you just bring it into your consciousness and go, I'm 35 years old. She died when I was 9. I'm not going to carry that forward. I'm not going to allow it to affect me the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be sad that I
Yeah.
didn't have her in my life, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to let it, that Wayne Dyer said, don't let the wake drive the boat. And
Yeah.
that's really powerful. It's like, don't let this past continue to influence you because a lot of the things that we learn as kids, we think are the driving force of how we should be behaving when in fact we should be putting them under a microscope and going, keep it, definitely get rid of that one, keep it, get rid of that one. And that's how
Yeah.
we perfect ourselves as leaders.
It's the hard work of leadership that no one talks about. It's
I'm talking
I
about it now.
no, exactly. Well, which is great, but
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm
But yes,
grateful.
that's it. I mean,
And
but this is,
it's
the idea is to give managers an insight that they didn't have before, which is that, we just get up in the morning and we just put on our clothes and we go to work and we're just ourselves. And ourselves in many situations isn't good. It's a mismatch. So we have to develop capabilities of interacting with people who are different than us. And most of us tend to operate with the vision that everybody else is thinking the way we do, right? I'll give you a perfect example of this. So this was many years ago. I was running a group of 31 retail bank branches, where you go for
yep,
mortgages and
yep,
checking
yep,
accounts and stuff, right? So um, we were very high performing and like number one in the entire bank consistently. And so I had an assistant named Susan, which worked for me for 15 years. She was incredible. Like we were hand in glove. And so I'm big on recognition and thanking people and
yeah,
acknowledging people and letting people
yeah,
tell their stories. How did you meet
yeah,
the goal? What was it that you did to make up for, the shortfall in the first half of the month? Tell everybody, like really indulging that. but Susan was behind the scenes. She's my assistant, but she's doing everything for our region, and she's incredible, and they all knew it. So I said, could everybody do me a favor? I go, I know Susan works for me, but all the things that she does to keep us going are incredible. Could we just have a round of applause for Susan? And they stood up and they gave her a standing ovation because she was that person.
Yeah.
They loved her. They knew what she was contributing and they were grateful. So we finished the meeting. This was early in the morning. We finished the meeting. It's now like, 5 or 6 o'clock and the meeting's over and everybody's gone home and I'm working in my office and she comes in and she goes, can I tell you something? And I go, yeah, like what? She goes, don't you ever do that to me again. And I go, what?
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea. And she goes, don't you ever, ever. This is how she's talking to me. Like somebody edited my first book. That's how close we were. And she goes, I don't like that. I'm happy when you tell me I'm doing well, but I don't want that. I don't like that. She's a major introvert. And I'm like, it was like this sort of epiphany that like, not everybody likes it the way I would like it. I want a parade. You're the greatest. You've done great. Look what you've done. That's not her. So you have to then figure out everybody else. Like, what is it everybody else wants and needs? Yeah. But if you just think everybody wants recognition and give it to them, this is a metaphor, right?
No, I think it's great because it also goes to, the love languages. And love languages and work and in personality. And that's what it is.
Correct.
That public displays of affection does not work for her. Like it's words of appreciation. And it's just like, I think this is where it's so interesting because, man, if you're blind to it and you choose to be blind and just plow forward, you'll get through life. It's kind of, I have this adage that we have a love affair with intensity in business, but intensity is a bulldozer. It'll get things done, but it'll leave carnage. And so it's kind of tempering that. And it's this idea of if I'm not willing to listen to Susie, I'm just going to bulldoze through her, then she's not going to perform. She's not going to feel cared about. She's not going to be like, exactly. She's all of those.
Yeah. I mean, but your point is exactly right. But the thing is that it's like, if I want to be CEO, right? Not everybody else wants to be CEO, right?
Yeah.
So if I work for you and my goal is to be CEO, you're going to go, hey, maybe 10 years from now you'll be here, you'll be ready. But right now I want to give you an opportunity to have a learning opportunity that you wouldn't have. I'm going to have you go spend a week in another department or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you're giving me the need that I have. So, but if I go to another guy who's completely satisfied with where he is, has no interest in being a CEO, and you're like, hey, we've got you on a development plan and we're going to be sending you and having all these special projects. And you're like, who asked for that? Well, the other guy did because he wants to be CEO. So I'm thinking I want to give that to everybody. And it's like, I didn't ask for that. I don't want that. So you have to figure out what people are about. Like you have to know their story. And that takes time. And that means you're not managing cookie cutter. You're managing, in my case, 31 different ways.
Yeah.
That's how you do
it. It's practicing empathy. I define empathy as putting your arms around someone and walking with them. Right? You had empathy with Susie when you're like, oh, okay, you don't like that. I won't do it again. The first one you had empathy with them is like, oh, you want to do that. Great. Here's the opportunity. The next one is like, oh, that's not for you. I'm in it with you rather than do it for me. Do it for me. And I think that's where, and I love how you kind of, shared the story about with your dad and competing against you guys. But man, that happens in so many workplaces. And we see that lack of engagement, the lack of well-being because I don't want to give to you because you're going to take from me. I think you mentioned a story. I think it was in one of your books where, somebody gets a bonus and the person's like, oh, you got paid too much. And it's like,
that was my boss. That was my own boss.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whose work I'm helping, I'm helping him succeed. But he saw the bonus and said, that's way too much. And I'm like, way too much. You should be saying, congratulations. So thanks so hard for all, thank you for all of your hard work. Instead, it's like, he's resenting me because he's a competitor. He was
Well,
competing against me and saw me as, always being sort of this lower level
yeah,
guy. And now I'm getting this big bonus and people are looking at what I'm doing. And he's
yeah,
like, I don't like that. You're getting my limelight. You
yeah,
swim, you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And
Well, and
so
it
that's
comes
not good
back.
leadership.
Well, having experienced that myself, I did that to my wife one time before I understood what was going on. And she was, getting these accolades and this recognition. And I was like, but I have value too. And, so I ended up stepping in and kind of squashing all of her because I was yearning for recognition for value that I had value. And it was my insecurity of saying, well, I have value too. And she's getting recognized. And I'm like, well, that's great for her. Instead of being so proud of her like I needed to be, it was like, but hey, look at me. I have value too. And I think if you look back, as we're talking about this, either experience your dad, that boss, why did he do that? Because he wanted recognition, and he wasn't secure enough in what he was doing to say, Mark, awesome, great, you helped our team, because he wasn't probably getting it from someone else to say, dude, Mark's on your team, he's killing it, way to lead him, way to coach him well, way to be a great leader. Probably
He's he
wasn't
was
getting
he
any of
was
that.
also like, he was your classic compete against your people kind of a guy. But
Yeah.
as long as he felt that you were at a junior level to him, subordinate, right? So
Yep.
if he's making more money, gets a better car from the company and all that kind of stuff, he's perfectly happy. But
Yep.
when he could see that there were people that were being recognized outside of his world, like the CEO of the company or something like that, saying, "Hey, that guy's done very well over there," he would be the guy. Yes, however, have I told you, like, he's not very good at math or whatever. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Discount.
because it triggers that, I'm the competitor here and he's getting too close to me.
Yeah.
And this is, you mentioned you, this is like one of the most important messages for your audience, is that get yourself secure in yourself. Like,
Yeah.
you can't lead if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't love yourself, if you don't know yourself, you can't do it. And it's like, I had enough situations where my teams weren't doing well, but I had invested so much in them, and I like hired them and developed them and, like, taught them everything, that when we were behind or we weren't doing well, all I needed to do was, I didn't need to go turn the dial like this. I just needed to go a little bit like, just, hey guys, we're not where we need to be. Promise me we'll just give our focus to this right now for the
Yeah.
next 2 weeks. Let's just really do this.
Yeah.
That's all I needed to do because the
Yeah.
investment was already there. I didn't go, oh man, like, you're going to get in trouble here if you don't hit this goal. So you better be turning that dial all the
Yeah.
way. Like, don't
You
take
didn't
the
lead
risk.
by fear, you led by heart.
Yes. Tell people I believe in you, but they have no reason to doubt you because you've been believing them in all
Yeah.
along. And
Yeah.
like, that's it. But if you're deeply insecure in yourself and you're threatened by other people's success, you're going to suck as a leader. You're just going to suck because people can feel it.
That's exact that last point. Whether and this is what I encourage people, hey, recognize your fears and insecurities because everyone else does. They may not know what, they may not know how, but they absolutely know. You knew by what your boss said to you that was an insecurity of his, right? And it comes back to this, again, funny little way to enter it, but this culture of genius compared to growth. He was not looking for your growth. He was like, look at my genius, look at my genius. And if your genius is going to outshine my genius, well, I got to squash you.
That's
And that
it.
all comes back to that insecurity. And I think from the very end, as you and I first talked, that's the problem people got to get over. And
It's interesting because the bank that we were working at got acquired, and he was at a level that the company that acquired us lopped off. Like, they wanted
okay,
their own people at that level.
yeah,
So he ended up going to another organization, another bank, financial institution, and got another senior role. And he went back to, I think he had, like 11 or 12 people running very big businesses, right? Um, And so he goes, "Hey, I just got this new job and it's a great bank. And, I'd like for you to, come work for me and we're going to have a great job." Not one of the 11 or 12 people, they all had a story. "Oh,
Yeah.
my sister, she's got cancer and I just can't do anything new," or, "I've got a new
All of it.
pet dog," or, or "I'm going on vacation." Like they're making up stuff because,
Yes.
and then I got together with these people and I go, "Hey, I don't want to use his name, but
No, no, I
X,
get it.
right? But X, called me and offered me this job and I just turned him down." And they were like, "He called me too." And I turned him down. And then I'm having the other he called me too. No, like, "Why didn't you take it?" "I would never go back to work for X." Like,
Yeah.
and that was our common thread,
And so
So
at
he
the
ended up,
same point, they were never performing at their capacity because they were always held down by that fear, that overpower, that overlording, the insecurity.
well, I think that his insecurity was
Yes.
that he needed to manage people with constantly pushing people. But I think what it did was like people performed because they had to. You got to keep your
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
or,
But
right?
I
So
would still
they did.
contend never to their full capacity.
I don't know. I mean, like I worked for him and I did great work, but I did it for my own drive. I did it for my own growth and learning. That was my
Yeah.
motivation. I wasn't motivated to
But
please him because you're never going to. But I think it's really a question of when you can get off the train, will you
yeah.
get off? And everybody will get off. So you're not gonna
Yeah.
he couldn't sustain the very talented people because, like I just said, they wouldn't go back to work for him again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And in a long
Yeah.
career, we end up working with people you think, "I'm never going to see that guy again." And then 2 years later, he's working at your organization and you're like, "Oh my God, I treated him like shit." And now, it's like, be wary that you're going to
Yeah.
run into the same
Yeah.
people and you're going to get different jobs and you're going to want to go back to people. And if you've treated them badly, they're going to remember. Feelings
Yeah.
drive behavior, not thinking. So if you've treated them badly, they're going to go, "I don't want any part of that."
Yeah.
This is what I've
Yeah.
seen happen like over and over.
Yeah.
I think I wrote about this that, that I've had a succession of promotions and jobs that I never asked for ever, like never interviewed for because people were like, "That's who we want for the job."
Yeah.
And because every day you're building your reputation and people are paying attention and they see the
Yeah.
flaws and they see the limits. So if you do this work that we've been talking about for the last hour, it shows up.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it shows up in the way you
Yeah.
present yourself, and people are like, "That's who I want."
Yeah. Um, Mark, where can people learn more about you, your books, all of that stuff?
All roads lead to, so there's another Mark Crowley out there. So I'm Mark C. Crowley. Um, and so markccrowley.com. I'm Mark C. Crowley on LinkedIn. I'm Mark C. Crowley on Twitter. So any of those is probably the easiest way. Everything's on my website. Everything's on LinkedIn. So those would probably be the best two places to go.
Awesome.
And then
Well,
Amazon
yeah.
for
The
the power
power
of
of
employee
employee
well-being.
well-being. Yes, the power of employee well-being. Mark, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of our viewers, listeners. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're listening, if you could rate and review this episode wherever you're listening, it will help more people find impactful leaders like Mark. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.